So I thought I'd go back to basics today. So I thought what I'd do is just go through just a couple of ways on how we can actually colour these, because this was originally launched before Lisa brought out her stencil, so we don't have a stencil to go with this. I've got a couple of techniques here, and I've got this third one as well. So I didn't really want to focus too much on the cards that I made. I just want to show you the techniques. We've got this card here, which is the image embossed in its entirety, as the 6x6 folder as it was designed by. All I've done is just split it down the side on the 6x6. This started out as a 6x6 card, and I've just split it just to give a different view. But this is coloured by actually colour tinting the embossing folder itself, and you can see how really pale and delicate that is. So that's a really lovely way of colouring, and actually really quite quick as well. I've got this one here where I've actually embossed it onto a rectangle piece of pink card, and I've used Lisa's Cloud 9, the Falling Snow, the white ink pad, to colour tint that over the top as well, and I just added some details. And then this one here, it's straight embossed onto a DL piece of cardstock, and I've just used the blending brushes to ink over the top. So we'll go through all the different combinations on how you can achieve these looks. So I'll start off with this one here. Lisa's super smooth card, because I know that this is fabulous to emboss. There's no cracking or distortion of the cardstock. And sorry, I'm just distracted. Just looked out my window and I've just seen the fox turn up. So I'm glad that I've closed all the windows and the door so Hazel can't see it, otherwise Hazel will be featuring today. But this fox is turning up earlier and earlier. Actually, don't you think it would be a good idea if Lisa designed a fox as well? A fox in an embossing folder and stenciled would turn out really well, wouldn't it? I've just thought of that. That's an idea. And I've noticed that Lisa's just put a post up into the group asking if there was one folder that she could design for us, what would it be? So I'm wondering if a fox might be a nice idea, and it would work for Christmas too, wouldn't it? Anyway, I digress. Sorry. Okay, so I've cut myself a piece of super smooth card. This is Lisa's cardstock. I've cut it just smaller than the embossing folder. That means that none of the cardstock will be sitting outside of the embossing folder, so that again reduces even more the amount of distortion that would be on the card. So I want to colour this, the embossing folder, before I actually put the card into it. So to do this, what you need to put the ink direct onto the embossing folder. What you need to do is make sure that you actually put it on the right side. So if we want to have the embossed image, whereas the image is raised on the front of our card, we need to make sure that the raised part of the design is going to sit underneath the card, so it pushes the design up. So if this is the raised area, and you'll be able to feel that quite easily with your finger there, so we want that to be left clear because that's going to be on the reverse of the cardstock, so therefore we want to put the colour onto this part of the embossing folder. Now I'm just having a quick look. I think what I might do is just get myself a piece of copy paper and put that under the embossing folder there, because then that you should be able to see where I'm adding the colour. So I'm going to put 3 colours on here, so I'm going to create sort of the landscape. So I've got the blue for the sky, obviously, green for the leaves at the bottom, and then we've got the pink for the flowers in between. So the colours I'm using are Surf's Up for the sky, Woodland Moss for the green, and Rhubarb Jam is just the absolute perfect reddy pinky colour for the foxgloves. You can choose whichever colours suit best, and why not even go a little bit out there and choose a completely different colour, because I think you can get some foxgloves that can be white with pink details as well, so that would be really stunning too. So initially I'm just going to use my blending brush. I'm going to pick up some of the blue ink and I'm just going to start blending this onto the areas where the sky is. So it would be in between the flowers basically. I'm not too fussed about missing the flowers at this stage. One, you'll be here all day doing that, and this is sort of meant to be sort of a quick technique. So I am catching the tops of the flowers there, but that's fine. Now I did actually try earlier on the embossing folder technique by dragging and dropping the ink onto the embossing folder. I wasn't overly keen on the look. It was a bit too intense for me for this particular folder. I think for other folders it would work. So you can see that I've added the blue. Now I shall come in with the pink, and I'm going to use a smaller stencil brush for this. So it's the rhubarb jam, which means that I can actually get into the details of the flowers there, and you can start seeing where those flowers are. I'm not particularly bothered about staying within the lines. I suppose the one thing I would say is perhaps put an even colour as best as you can all over the flowers, because then that'll give you a nice even look. You could use your brush for this, particularly if you don't want to put the blue around the outside. You can just do the flowers on their own. But if you're going all in and you're embossing, you might as well put as much ink on as you can. Now don't ever be worried either, if you've never done this technique, you won't stain the embossing folder, because especially if you're using Lisa's inks, the Cloud9 inks, if you were to use perhaps distress inks as well, they would be fine because they're water based. So as soon as you spritz water onto there and take a cloth to clean it off, then all of this ink will be removed, no problem at all. And obviously you want to make sure that after you've done this, you do give it a really good wipe before you go on to another project, just in case you get a little surprise with a little bit of ink left on there. So I'm just coming down, just covering where all those flowers are, so that's a relatively even covering of ink. So now we want to come in with our green. So again, I'm using the woodland moss. I just really like this green colour. It's such a natural colour to use with anything plant based, I'd say. I'm just adding that on there. Again, that may just blend slightly with the colour, the ink that you've added to the bottom of flowers. That's absolutely fine. So I'm using my brush. You can also, if you want to, come in with a smaller stencil brush, and if you just want to add extra colour where those leaves are, then you can use your stencil brush, whether it be this size or even the smaller one, and you can actually sort of pinpoint and add even more detail that way. The same way on the flowers, if you perhaps wanted to add a little bit of a different tone onto some of the areas of the flower, you can just come in with a smaller brush and possibly even a different colour, and you can just pinpoint and add that extra detail like that. Much the same as you would if you was using it on cardstock. So now we have that, we can take our cardstock and we can line that up. Now mine is just that little bit smaller, but that's fine. Now at this stage you don't really want your embossing folder or your cardstock to be moving too much in your embossing folder, so just be aware and sort of have a tight grip on that, just to make sure it doesn't sort of smudge around on the inside. And then you can just take this through your die cutting machine. So I'll do that just now so you can see how that comes out. If for whatever reason you have put the ink on the wrong side, or you've got a bit confused and the image comes out debossed but cut and coloured, that's absolutely fine. It works just as well. So it's it really does depend on sort of which area, you know, whether you want a debossed or an embossed look. So as you take this away, you can actually see how the colours transferred onto your embossing folder. Now I've put more ink on it this time than I did for this one here. This one's turned out a lot paler, but that's absolutely fine. What you can always do if you find that that's too much, you can actually go on with your, make sure I take the right brush, a blending brush, and you can just smooth it out, and what that will do is just ease out that ink a little bit more. And it might be worth, while you still have that ink on there, to actually re-emboss. Let me get myself another piece of card. Okay, it's just a smaller piece of card here, but I'll just show you if we can get a second image out of the ink that we've put on there. Oh, excuse me, I'm feeling a bit croaky at the moment. I think hay fever's kicking in today, so I've closed all the windows. I think it's just lingering a little bit. So let's just see if we can get a second impression out. And we can. Look, you can see there that that one's turned out much paler, probably a lot more closer in colour to what I've done there. But you've got the two different images for you to use, and I think both are just as pretty as each other, and that is ready just to go straight onto a cardstock. This one in particular, if you wanted to do it this way, you just take a slice off down there, you put this extra part of the image onto the back, and you have your 6x6 cardstock. And then obviously you can dress that up and put your sentiment on or not. I think sometimes with these floral ones that are so detailed, I think sometimes it's just nice to leave as is on the front, and then you can put your message on the inside. So I think maybe even for a Father's Day card would be nice. Someone who likes their gardening. You've noticed this one, I've actually put blue around the outside as opposed to a pink, and that really brings out the different colours. So that's one technique of using the embossing folders. So I will just clean this now. I've got myself a spray. And you can see already how the ink has melted away. And what you possibly could do, which I haven't tried actually, you could take yourself a piece of mixed media card or watercolour cardstock, and instead of wasting that ink and wiping it away, you could run it through with a piece of watercolour card and see how that turns out. So that would also be another technique. You might as well give it a try. If it doesn't work, then you know perhaps not to do that again. But yeah, it's different looks. So what I'll show you now is a different technique, and I shall emboss onto a piece of coloured cardstock. Now I've cut myself a rectangle already, so you don't always need to emboss a 6x6 piece of cardstock. And the advantage of using a piece of cardstock that's slightly smaller is you can actually cherry pick which part of the design that you want, which again is a nice choice to have. So I'm just going to make sure that I line up. For me, if I do this, I like to line up the bottom of these stems with the bottom of my die cut piece of cardstock. That just sort of sits nicely for me, but it's not essential, of course. So I'm just going to line that up. There we are. I haven't got any ink on this one. I did try putting the ink on, white ink onto the embossing folder and doing the last technique. For me, it didn't work quite as well. Let me just think. Because I think the way that the ink, the white ink is designed, it didn't transfer as well. It wasn't as apparent, which is why I prefer to do it this way round. So I'll emboss first, and then we can add the white ink afterwards. So we have our image there. And this is American Crafts cardstock. It's a pack that I got from Lisa before she brought out her own cardstock pack. So it's a beautiful raspberry colour there, and you can hopefully see, if I hold that in place, you can actually see the quality of the embossing even on the coloured cardstock there. So we can bring this to life, as we see here, by adding the white ink. So I've got my 2 stencil brushes, which I've kept so far. I've done really well. I've kept them so far just for white ink. We haven't contaminated it just yet. And my ink pad is really clean too. Well, yeah, really clean. So I'm going to take my white ink pad, and because they're quite a firm texture, so what it does enable you to do is to drag the ink across the embossed detail. Now I'm not pushing really hard, because that will mean that the ink will sort of fall into the less embossed areas. But all I'm doing is just swiping that down, and you can see how the highest areas there are picking up that white ink. So you just do that as much as you can until you think that you've sort of caught all the areas that the pad can actually ink by itself. You have a slight little amount coming onto the background there, but that's absolutely fine. And you can see straight away how that has changed the look of those flowers. Now what we can come in and do is bring our stencil brushes, and this is where these small ones really come into their own, because we've got the detail. You can just start blending that ink while it's still wet into the flower, so you can see that you are actually creating that shading while that's still wet. So, and that's quite quick. Again, you don't really need to be artistic. And by that I mean you can get intimidated sometimes by having a paintbrush or a stencil brush in your hand, thinking that you do have to sort of be precise in what you're doing, but you really don't. You can see there that all I'm doing is just adding and just blending the ink out from where the ink pad was touched onto the cardstock, and I'm just blending it out, and that's really softened that down. So hopefully now you can actually see that the details are really coming to life. There will be some areas that the ink pad hasn't reached, so what you can do is just pick up your ink from the ink pad and just start blending, as you would do with any colour. It's actually really quite therapeutic. So it does take a little bit of time, not too much. But initially with the white ink you won't see it go straight onto the cardstock. It's that gradual build up of the white chalky effect, and then you'll suddenly realise, oh yeah, that actually does look very different. If you're going to do this, perhaps it might be an idea just to keep just a plain embossed piece next to you, because then you can actually see the difference. You can actually see how much you have actually shaded it. So I think that might be quite a nice technique. There we are. I think that's worked really well. I think also it works that we just keep the leaves white. I did experiment using green on the leaves on the pink cardstock, and for me that didn't work quite as well. So I think it works just really nice that we just keep the white on there. Now what we can do, what did I do with that? I'm going to use the pens, Lisa Horton pens. Do you remember these coming out? Maybe some of you have them already. They come out as a pack of 2. We have the coloured gel ink pens and we have the fine liner pens. Now fine liner pens come in a pack of 24, so we've got a real lovely range of colour there. So there's pretty much a colour to match all the colour cardstock that you'll be using. But the gel ink pens has a white pen in it here, and it's really fine, really nice small ink. And if you look at the detail of a foxglove, and I think I put one of these photos up in the group earlier on, they do have little white circles in here. So what you can do, you can just take yourself this little white pen, and it works. It's really well. It's probably one of the most reliable white pens I've ever used. And you can just add little circles. Can you see what I'm doing there? Let me just raise that to the camera a little bit, and hopefully you can see that if I hold it still so the camera can focus. I'm just adding the little white details there, which is what a normal foxglove would have. So I won't sit and do all of these now because there's an awful lot of flowers there. But that's just a really nice way to add extra detail. And you can start building this up, and it starts looking like a real work of art once you've added all these extra details on. Now you can choose to do one flower spike, or you can do all the flowers. It's entirely up to you. And looking at it, it would have been nice if I'd have done just the one flower spike. So I can carry on doing that on all the areas. The other thing you can do is to perhaps use the fine liner pen. Choose a colour that really does coordinate well. And if you just want to put just a little added detail into the top of the flowers, just to highlight those a little bit more. You don't need white on them because you need to add perhaps a little bit of shadow to the flowers. All I'm doing is just using Lisa's guide, the guide that she's put on, and the shading guide, and just adding a little bit of extra detail with this darker pen. Now, and it's a really nice therapeutic thing to sit and do. I got a bit carried away doing on this one. I actually added a couple of colours here because I started off with a slightly pinker colour and added the darker one. And I think for this sort of card you really don't need to go too fancy, which is why I've just sort of kept simple and just mounted that onto a white card. But that's just a really nice effect, and that would work really well onto black card, onto navy card as well, and even grey. But I think that really suits this style of flower. So the last technique I want to show you is the blending directly onto an embossed image. Now, the foxgloves, as you can see, is a 6x6 inch folder. You don't always need to emboss onto a 6x6 piece of card. This is embossed onto a DL piece of card. Now there are several ways of doing this. If you wanted to, you can emboss onto a 6x6 piece of card and then you can cut it down to shape. Or you can take your die cut, as you've seen here, because I've got this lovely stitch detail around the outside. And I've just happened to notice this today, and I'm hoping Lisa won't change sort of the construction of her embossing folders at all, because if we want to emboss this, we don't want to have the line at the top, which if you see here, we would get an embossed line at the top, and then it would look less professional. But with this particular folder it works. You know, we have this gap between the two hinges that Lisa's left for us. The insert of Lisa's DL die sets means that you can actually slot that through there. Now, I've just happened by this by pure chance today, so I'm hoping that Lisa doesn't change things. What that does, it means you can line up your DL piece of cardstock, and I'll show you the sets that I mean. There was 4 or 5 in the set. This is the nested, the slims, nested torn slims, or there's the postcard ones. There's various different sets, and these are from the original release, which is why it's in the original packaging. But this insert here, which is smaller than the DL size, if you cut your piece of cardstock with that, and this size of the die is interchangeable amongst all of the nested slim die sets, will be the same size. So it's that I've used that fits through that hinge on the embossing folder. Now when you come to emboss this, you take your embossing plates, and what you want is this part to just hang off the side. Now obviously we can't do it this way because that will put too much pressure through the embossing folder to go through first. So you turn your embossing folder around, just line up the edge. It doesn't need to hang off the edge because the cardstock will do that, but just line up what would be the top of the embossing folder with the back end of your plates and put that through. It would actually be this way, wouldn't it, because I'd put my folder on top, and put that through your embossing, your die cutting machine that way round. So when that comes out embossed, you have a really nice clean emboss, and you'd never know that that came from a smaller 6x6 embossing folder because you don't have the mark there. So that was just a really sort of nice little tip that I found out for you this morning, so that I can pass that one on to you. Now you can just spend your time and you can choose the colours and to colour tint this. So initially I'm going to come in with the woodland moss again, just with a small brush, and just gently colour the bottom here, and you'll see that the higher areas, the embossed areas, are going to pick up more of the ink. So we leave that like that. Now I shall colour tint the flowers just gently, and I'm going to come in with a lighter pink to start with. So I've got the sugar candy to take a small amount of ink. I'm just going to wipe that so we don't have too much green. There we are. I can leave that there. Now I'm just gently just going to pick up some of the colour and just put that on just gently onto the flowers, and you can see that the colour is going onto the higher areas, the embossed areas, so it's not going onto the background. So that will just give me my base colour across all the flowers. You can leave it at this, and you can do this technique if you wanted to do it really quickly. You can do it with your darker colour, and there you are. But if you wanted to go for a shaded look, a two coloured look to start getting some detail, you can then come in with your smaller brushes again. So rhubarb jam, again, is absolute perfect colour for the foxgloves. I'm just going to turn my embossing round because I'm finding that this is the best, for me, this way my hand works, best way to do this, and it feels less like I'm painting, so it's therefore it's less intimidating. So normally I would say when I pick up the ink, I pick up the ink with my brush and I would blot it off onto the side because I don't want that initial burst of colour. But for this I found that I do, so it actually went against all my instincts. So I'm going to pick up the ink and I'm working straight onto the cardstock, and I'm not working on to the inner part of the bell, I'm working on the outside of the bell and just stroking that up. Can you see? Like that? Let me just wait for the camera to catch up and just make sure you can see what I'm doing. There we are, yeah. And what that will do, it will pick up the detailing that Lisa has put onto the embossing folder, but also because of the nature of the stencil brush that you're using, it actually is going to leave brush stroke marks as well. So if you just work with that you end up with an awful lot of texture on the outside of those foxglove bells. So I'm leaving the inside of the bell the colour, the light pink colour as was picked up by my stencil brush and the sugar candy, and just working as much, you know, as close as I can onto the outside of the foxglove bell and bringing up the details that way. Now you're not going to get the same detailed effect as you would do with the stencils technique that we've been using for the past few months. Actually, I don't know how long now. It's having Lisa's stencils in the range is just become a matter of course now, isn't it? I can't remember when she first brought them out. It's been a good while, isn't it? So I think that's why it's nice to come back to the original embossing folders like this and just show you the techniques, because these are just as valid, obviously, and they create such different techniques and such different looks as well. You can see it's actually quite quick. Again, it's not a technique to be frightened of if you don't think you're artistic or you don't think you can paint. That really isn't a bother. You just go ahead and say, I'm just while I'm chatting, this is building up really nicely and really quickly. I won't go ahead and do it all because, again, I can get a bit engrossed into that. It's actually quite a relaxing thing to do if you've got a bit of time. Now what I will do, I've just got myself a smaller stencil brush and I'm just going to come in with a bit of the sugar candy, and I'm just, some of the areas that didn't pick up that lighter pink, I'm just going to just add in. And you see this time round I am blotting off the ink because I don't want that huge burst of colour, because I want the inside of the bells to be quite subtle. There, like that. Actually, let me just show you how I would colour the top there. I would just use the colour that I've already got on my brush. And the detailing is too small to actually go into, unless you're using alcohol pens or a fine tip watercolour. You won't be able to pick up that individual detail. So what you can do, once it starts getting that little bit smaller, is just take your stencil brush, your smallest one, and just work upwards. And again, you would only catch the raised areas, the embossed areas there, so that it just adds that colour there, like that. Okay. Now one thing I did do on this one here, actually, I did add a little bit of artistic license on this one, just to add just a few more details. Again, I wanted to just try something, and I came in with the fine liner pens again. This time I just come in with a yellow, and I thought what I can do, just where the bell ends and the inside of the bell sort of starts, you've got a lip there, an embossed area with a bit of shading, so I thought I'd just go in there with a bit of yellow. It's only a tiny amount, just allow your pen just to follow that embossed line. And it's a really small detail. Again, it's these small details I think that really add the finishing touches to the card, and if you just follow that around, the build up over all the flower bells there will actually create just that small detail. I don't know if you can see that. Let me just see if I can raise that up. Hopefully you can pick that up. But again, that's just a really nice detail. It's the same with the veins of the leaves. Pick a colour that is quite close to the colour that you've used. I always find that that's the less scary way of doing it. You can always build up and just draw into the veins of the leaves. Lisa's already put that shading and that detail there for us, so you're not having to think. All you're doing is just running the pen through the embossed detailing that is already there, and it just highlights it that little bit more. It just adds that little bit of definition like so. Again, if I had to carry on working on this, I would end up with an image that looks like this. And just to finish that off, I'm just going to take some blue. Now this is my blue blending brush, and there's plenty of ink on this already. And I shall just use the ink that is on there. So we've got a hint of blue going around the outside. You don't necessarily need to put too much blue on the inside here, because you've got that suggestion of blue that's being picked up on the edge. That is, I think, is enough, but that is entirely up to you. If you want to make that a lot darker on the outside, then that's another option that you can do. But you've got that suggestion of blue sky around the outside, which even on, if we're crafting into winter, we like to have that suggestion of a nice sunny sky, don't we? So again, you can just mount that simply onto the front of a DL card, and I just mounted that onto a piece of navy satin card there, so it just brings out that colour. This is a really nice project if you've got time just to sit and play, choose your favourite colours and just watch your image come to life. The next step up from this, I would say, would be watercolouring on and putting the details there. So this is a really nice sort of introduction into that, and it gives a really nice soft muted look to that. So hopefully that's given you 3 ideas on how to use the embossing folders, particularly a 6x6 embossing folder, where we've ended up with 2 cards that aren't 6x6 in shape, which I think is a really nice idea as well. I shall see you again next Tuesday, and Dawn will be with you on Monday as well. So enjoy your weekend, everybody. Thanks for joining me today, and I shall see you next week. Take care.